Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Apostasy, and I welcome you to today's episode of Women's Atheist UNLOAD. I will be joined with my co-host Sunny Shell as we interview author and TED Talk speaker Diane Benscoter. Before we begin, we kindly ask that you like today's stream, subscribe to our channel Skeptic Haven, and ring that bell. If you like what we do here on Skeptic Haven, please consider joining our Patreon. And as always, feel free to interact in the chat. Let's start the show.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hello.
Hey, I love that intro song.
I do too. I know. It's so good. It's so good to see you and so good to host with you.
It's really good to see you too. This is our first time. We've we've been able to work with just about everybody else, and we haven't been able to work together. So I'm really glad that we have this opportunity.
Me too.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and welcome our guest. I want to give a warm welcome to Diane Benscoter. She's a renowned author, speaker, and consultant who has dedicated her life to studying and combating destructive cults and extremist ideologies. She is a former member of the Unification Church, also known as the Moonies, and her personal experience with indoctrination and radicalization has given her a unique perspective on the methods and impact of extremist groups. Through her writing, speaking engagements, and consulting work, Diane strives to raise awareness of the dangers of cults and extremist groups, and to provide individuals and communities with the tools they need to resist their influence. Her work is both insightful and inspiring, offering hope to those who have been affected by extremist ideologies, and providing guidance on how to prevent others from falling into the same trap. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that nice introduction.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So I guess let's just get right into it. So in the intro, it said that you were a part of the Unification Church. So could you give us a bit of your background and how you became a leading voice on the topic of cults and psychological manipulation?
My journey into it, it really started when I was 17 years old, and I was really searching at that time. I was really psychologically vulnerable because I just didn't feel like I fit in to the world that existed, and I was really upset about the war. And I wanted to do something about it. And the music of the era was influencing me. And I really wanted to try to use my life for something bigger. And so when I saw this flyer inviting people to go out for a walk from Omaha to Des Moines in Nebraska to Iowa. It's about 150 miles, to hear this speaker. And it was a walk for world peace, which was right up my alley. And so I decided to go. There's a lot more details than that, but I spent 5 days being lectured to and being told about how there was going to be this new world built. At the end of that lecture, I came to realize that God had chosen me to be a disciple of the second coming of Christ. And so that's how I got into the Moonies. And I was a member for 5 years. I really, really believed strongly that was the case, that I was to serve the Messiah. That's why I was alive. And that there would be peace on earth. And that, after all, the second coming was on earth. You really believe it. Yeah, it's important to understand that I really believed that strongly.
Yeah. Wow. I know that Stephen Hassid was also a part of the Moonies as well. Did your time with them overlap with his time with them at
We were
all?
in at about the same time, but he, I didn't know him inside the
Mm-hmm.
group at all.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of what was called the MFT, the mobile fundraising teams.
Okay.
And we spent like 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, selling candy and flowers on the streets from, traveling in a van. And folding up the money and sending it back to headquarters. And yeah, I was, spent most of my time doing that from age 17 to 21. That was the majority of what I did. I also went through an intensive training. It was 120-day indoctrination type training. So through this experience, once you've been inside and you go through a deprogramming and you start to realize that the whole thing was a lie. And I spend a lot of time talking about how much I believed it, because that's the thing. Once you're in, it's really hard to listen to logic, because you believe that you're above the law and that that person has a connection with absolute truth. And so to give that up is an identity crisis. It's so painful to realize that, oh my God, all of that, I mean, I worked so hard. I gave so much of myself, and I put myself in dangerous situations, and it was dangerous. I went through some really horrible things. And so I think it's important to understand how powerful that religious aspect can be used to control someone, because that part of that your psychological part of yourself that really wants to be loved and accepted and to use your life for meaningful things, that's part of being human. And people who really care deeply are going to put themselves into this even more and want this to be true, because life is hard and it's hard. It's a lot more complicated to realize that you don't know all the answers, and you have to grapple with complexity, and you have to sometimes be really confused about the world and not know who to trust. It's a much harder existence than just simply believing.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. Like, even just coming out of Christianity, and I think there's a lot of similarities. I don't know about you, Sunny, but
Yes, we were Seventh-day Adventists, and then Southern Baptists. So, but Seventh-day Adventists are very similar to the Mormons, and so we didn't get shunned like some of them do, but like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. But it was very similar. So you have a prophet, and I think anytime you have a prophet, that's a problem.
right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That addiction to power. That when somebody has kind of a taste of that power of controlling other people, you just can't get enough of it. It's like heroin. Once you're an addict, you want, and taking that kind of psychological control over people, you can really gain power or wealth, or influence. And those things are highly desirable. We see it in the world today, and it's very frightening. How effective psychological manipulation is in the world today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've watched a few of your videos, and you talk a lot about the mental trap of circular thinking. Could you maybe explain a bit about that and what that means? If people have we've heard of circular logic and stuff, but could you explain the mental trap that you have talked about?
It is really circular logic. It all comes back to, but it's God. So, you can go, questions come up. There's maybe some suspicion that something isn't right within this group. Maybe you see some internal conflict that doesn't go along with the doctrine, but you go back to, but what's really important to me? And it's that the world, that I'm useful in this world, and maybe I should question it, but this is God. So no matter what, it always comes back to but this is God. So you really can't question. Everything kind of ricochets off that bubble that you're in. It's like you're in an information silo or a bubble that is impenetrable, because you're just going around and around in this circle that does not allow you to question. Because if you're questioning, that just means that you're more human. That's to question is that's your human part that is not connected to God. Because if you are a good, loyal servant of God, you would just do what God says. So you're just trapped inside there and you can't get out.
Yeah, and I've been in church services where they would tell you like any kind of doubt is not from God. It's a sign of your faith being weak. It's a sign of temptation from the devil. So it just seems like it's all, when you're starting to have that sort of logical thinking, you're being told that it's bad, it's wrong, and you're not supposed to have it. So you're trained to shut it down. And I did that for so long.
Yeah, I've had the thing where you're made to feel guilty over your thought, like the shame. Like, who are you to question God? You're just a human, like you were saying, Diane. You're just a human. So you end up feeling a lot of shame and guilt over that.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to understand that this all takes place on the psychological level. It is not an intellectual discussion that you think we all want to. If we have someone in our life who is trapped in that kind of a like information silo, in that kind of a bubble, we want to just take a stack of information and throw it at them, or to lay it at their feet at least, and please read this, and think that will do it once they see the logic. But you have to realize that it is not about logic. It's about how this makes you feel and what you get out of it, and what it would cause if you questioned it. You'd have to feel guilt and shame, and and this community that you've grown to love and think of as family, they would all think of you as less, think of you as being part of the satanic world or whatever. And what if it is the satanic world? And, so all of this is primal. It's your fear. It's your desire to be loved. It's your desire to feel like your life has meaning. All of those very human things. That's why the logic doesn't get in, because you don't want it to not be true.
Right. Especially when you have spent so much time devoted to it. It feels like, well, I would have wasted my life. I've spent so much time already. I know that there's a term for that. I just can't think of it off the top of my head, but you've been dedicated for so long.
Yeah.
I can't think of the term right now. I think it's a fallacy, but and it's hard to give it up.
And part of the control, because there's intentional control, and part of it is polarization. And to achieve true polarization, which you really need to control someone, you have to make them believe that there's an us and there's a them. And part of the messaging that comes through is that you cannot trust the laws, you cannot trust the government, you cannot trust intellectuals, the school systems, you can't trust medicine. You can't trust all of the institutions. Once you can take that away from people and make them believe that those are all untrustable and evil even, then all that's left is this group and this thinking. And so you don't really have a logical choice. You're above the law. Those facts that people are handing you, those are just lies. That's the disinformation. That's what they will think. That's why it's so tricky to help someone exit.
Yeah. So I have another question. You talk about how cults rewire the brain. Can you elaborate on this? Because when you mentioned that in your TED Talk, which everyone should check out on YouTube, just type in Diane Ben Scoter TED Talk and you can watch it. found that such a fascinating way of looking at this topic in general. So just could you touch on that for us?
Well, rewiring the brain is, as an example, I think that a lot of young people, when they're individuating, when they're at that time in their life, when they're starting to, their frontal cortex is developing, and you're starting to make adult type decisions, and you're looking less to your parents to tell you what's right and wrong and good. That's just part of growing up. It's part of the brain development. And when you get into a controlling environment, those decisions are made for you. And in a way, you regress to a childlike thinking. And because you're not using that part of your brain where complex thinking and adulting is taking place, as much as you are falling back into kind of like a childlike, looking to someone for all answers kind of thinking. And so I think that does change the way that people are able to make decisions. Now, I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done on actual, like using fMRI to do more research on if they could actually see a difference between someone who is fully in a controlling environment and then someone who maybe 10 years later has come out, and just see how their brain differs. But I don't think there's been enough research to be able to really talk about rewiring the brain in a scientific way.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
I think especially the fact that we live in such a religious society, that any type of a study, there's people who determine who gets the money to do these studies, and any study that may be questioning religion, maybe the studies that are not the ones that they can get the funding for, cancer research or, one of those type things, but actually looking at how religion and the indoctrination level of religion can damage the brain. I'm just wondering if, not necessarily damage, but how it rewires that brain, if that's something that could be a problem, if they, are maybe not able to do those type of studies. I'm just curious about that.
Well, I think that there's a lot of concern about what we will or won't be able to do if there's more kind of authoritarian movement in government, and more restrictions, less ability to do things, more control of certain lobbyists and how they can control society. That's why I think it's important to point to what is psychological manipulation, because no one wants to be taken advantage of by someone. And those people who really want to take away people's rights and to have a theocracy, for instance, as a governmental model, will not want to look at scientific evidence that shows that religion is a very powerful tool that can be used to manipulate people on a psychological level in order to gain power over them and their decision-making processes.
Yes.
It's so.
I know a lot of people who watch our show have heard me talk about this many times, but you don't know this story. I'll make it super quick, but I'll just give you an example. When we left our church, the pastor we were in a Christian church, and the pastor excommunicated us publicly over the course of 7 months and brought our names up in front of the whole church and congregation. And every time I talk about it, I make it very much known that he was not doing that for our benefit to bring us back to the congregation like he says it was. I very much say he was doing that in order to keep everyone else who is still there from doing what we did, from leaving, because it makes everyone sit there thinking, oh my goodness, I would never want to be brought up in such a public manner again and again and again. And I think that is very much a psychological manipulation tactic that they back it up by the Bible. But it's dehumanizing in one way, and it's it is to scare people. And so every time I talk about it, in case anyone from the church happens to watch it, I always say they're doing it for your benefit, not ours. And I hope that maybe that will plant a seed and help them wake up. So,
well, what you said
One of
is
the
interesting, because
sorry.
one of the questions in chat
oh
is
yeah,
what are some of the ways that they manipulate them? And you touched on a really good one.
yeah. So
I think
go ahead.
that it's when you're trying to create a controlling environment, and it's a hallmark of most controlling environments. Like if you look at Nexium was in the news a lot lately, and there's been a lot of different cults that have been in the news, and they oftentimes will ostracize publicly. Scientology's famous for it. Ex-Scientology's fear for lawsuits and all kinds of abuse. People who leave are examples of what's bad and evil in the world. They become worse than any of their other enemies, because you know what's going on inside, and you can really expose things that are going on inside. So shaming, ostracizing, suing, or violence even against people that disagree with you are very common in controlling environments.
Yeah. And they do, I think we said this earlier, talking about saying how people are demonic. They do refer to people who leave as basically working for Satan. So
yes.
Yeah. Which is Satan is obviously the worst thing that you could compare someone to. So why would you want to be working for Satan?
Right.
So in your experience, what are some of the long-term psychological effects that former cult members may experience after leaving the group?
I think that it's a form of trauma, and that it's an identity crisis, and you have to work on shame kind of issues. There's also repairing family relationships, and there's a slow process of rebuilding an internal structure for yourself that can hold you up, because that has been built for you previously in the organization or in this controlling environment. And when you no longer have that as a framework for who you are, how you view the world, what you like and don't like, your values, all of that, you feel so lost and empty when you leave. And so that has to be rebuilt. And it takes time sometimes to know who you are, how you want to be after going through that. And it's a trauma. And so healing from the trauma, there's often triggers that people experience in certain things. I still, after all of these years, there's certain things that trigger me. And it's that just remind me of that environment so much that I can't even be there. And so but there's also a lot of wisdom that can be gained from going through this experience of kind of really being forced to recreate yourself and really understanding how you will never let someone like this or some group like this control your decision-making processes again, no matter how hard it is to grapple with complexity,
Yeah.
I wonder, do you have difficulty with trusting again? Not just, because what you just said was, I could kind of relate to that when, I will never allow anyone or any group to control me and manipulate me like that. Do you end up finding it harder to trust people?
Some people do have issues with like attachment disorder kind of stuff, or just feeling like you trusted so deeply and you'll never trust anything like that again. And some people, it could be any kind of belief system, anything that has too much dogma of any kind, just those kind of things. And sometimes it is on a more human, like love level of I don't know if I can trust my heart with anyone ever again.
Yeah, that's very true. So what are some of the misconceptions that people have about psychological manipulation, and how would you address them?
I think it's very common to know someone who's fallen down a rabbit hole in a conspiracy theory, or especially if they're part of like a hate group or something, or their belief systems are so kind of ugly to you
Right.
that it's hard to think of them as being have that humanness or that really preciousness sometimes that led them to join this organization. So I think that the misconception is that they're stupid and bad people if they're in a cult of some kind or some sort of a controlling environment, and that they're that idea of people being stupid, I think, is the biggest misconception. They're not stupid. It is a process that you really can control someone on a psychological level.
Yeah, I was. We had a super chat from Farron. Thanks, Skeptic Haven team, for your ongoing impactful content. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here. I was actually, when you talked about conspiracy theories, I was going to ask you about QAnon, and if you have any insight on the psychological manipulation that group, because there's I find that there's so many people who have been wrapped up in that, and there's so many different avenues of getting into it. It's not just one way.
I've spoken about this quite a bit.
Have you? Okay.
In fact, I'm actually working with a couple people who are in jail, who were at the insurrection, and working with them on a one-on-one basis. And my organization right now is working to create a public health approach to psychological manipulation. And because I speak often on this topic, there's like 1,000 people in our database who have come to us asking for help. They're mostly loved ones of people who have fallen down a rabbit hole of conspiracy thinking kind of mentality, us versus them, and they don't know what to do. They're thinking of divorce, or they just can't be around them anymore. It's too hard. And so it's really prevalent. It's very frightening, and people are in a lot of pain because they don't know how to relate to their loved ones. It's really hard to see. And it's the same thing as like these guys I'm talking to in prison. They're good people who really are seeing now that they've, fell for they really believed what they were doing was right and just and good, and standing up for family and country, and it's so easy to fall into a information silo online and to start being believed that this is all there is and everything outside isn't true. And so there's so much of that, really. And so we're really building our organization services at scale to deal with this huge demand there is for people to understand what's going on with my loved one. I don't know how to talk to them anymore, and they're scaring me,
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a few people. I feel like all the people in my life who have some sort of religious affiliation believe some part of a QAnon conspiracy theory, whether it be the election, even though I'm in Canada, lizard people, believe it or not, the vaccine. I know I can count on both of my hands the amount of people just off the top of my head who have fallen victim to some kind of QAnon. And
I think another thing to understand about that right now is that there's so much pain in society. People are in a lot of pain. They're scared. They don't know who to trust. And so that's why they cling to something to make sense of the world. And then they get caught up in it and start to think it's all there is. And so,
I wonder about the algorithms with social media as well, because we had COVID, which was traumatizing for everybody, and then people couldn't leave, so they're sitting in front of their computers for hours on end. And the algorithms of social media, they're kind of controlling us in a lot of ways. They control we hear, what we see, who we interact with. And I think that's actually become a little bit dangerous.
Very much so. And I think, when you think about a public health approach to psychological manipulation, there's really 3 pillars. One pillar is helping those people directly affected. Another is educating at a population level to inoculate against this kind of being taken advantage of on this level, and to educate people about what to watch for and how to take care of themselves around that, how to notice it and how to take care of their loved ones around it. And then the third pillar is social. It is looking at policy-driven kind of issues and how to, lobby for the ways to build guardrails around social media, for instance, so that there's some kind of policy that understands how people are being taken advantage of and manipulated online in ways that are harmful to them individually, harmful to their families, and to society at large. So.
Right. When you mentioned like being inoculated to it, in some of your previous talks that I saw you in, you mentioned viral, how do you say it?
Mimetic.
Thank you. Infection and compromised immune systems. And I thought that was just a really great way of putting that into perspective. So could you just, if for people who I've never been told that term before, and I thought it was really interesting. Could you explain what viral mimetic infection is?
Well, mimetics was, I speak of mimetics, it was an area of study. Richard Dawkins and such were talking a lot about how ideas spread like an infection. And so even though that mimetics is not even today thought of necessarily as a really valid area of study necessarily, that concept of it being a viral, a way that an idea is spread from person to person like a virus. And so a viral mimetic infection is how I started trying to describe what I saw going on with the use of the internet and how ideas are spread and people get infected in that way with these kind of, not memes like the pictures of a, not like that,
like
but that concept of, not like that, like the concept of mimetics. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was such a good way of putting it.
I wonder about our kids. You were talking about us having the ability to kind of inoculate ourselves once we get this information and we learn how to process it. For our kids, though, they don't have the ability yet, to really discern a lot of these things, and yet they're online and in social media a lot more than a lot of adults are, although we all are on quite a bit. But what would you say that maybe parents or grandparents of children should be looking out for or talking to their kids about when it comes to this?
I think the most direct way is to begin for all of us, and young people is a great place to start, with understanding about psychological vulnerability, and that people have psychological pain, that sometimes in life you feel alone, you feel like you're not part of the cool kids, you feel like you're missing out, or whatever this, or you feel hurt by a relationship, or when you're in psychological pain, you look for relief, and you can look for things that are healthy as relief. And we can teach our children that, but there are predators out there that will take advantage of your pain and try to sell you a bill of goods, basically, so that they can think of you as an asset. And they can take advantage of your entire life and well-being in some cases, by using that pain. And so that's the way to inoculate young people, I think, is to start talking about psychological pain in a way that could be understood and protected against those, because there will always be predators out there who will see a way to take advantage of someone's pain and latch onto it and make them the answer for that pain. It can even it happens in abusive relationships, one-on-one, all the time.
Yeah. I was just thinking 2 years ago when I was like a new mom, I became a part of like a multi-level marketing, all the truth comes out. And in part of our like recruitment training, they would say like, oh, like just keep like, be aware of what you see people posting on Facebook. Like if someone's lost a job, like reach out to them and offer that this is something that could help them and support them. So, and they would give lots of different suggestions on things to look for. So it was always like when you're really down on your luck, when people are wanting to like think that this is something that's going to be like the answer to all their problems, or be like, oh, single moms at Christmas want to make extra money, and just approach them and spin it on this way. And I always felt very uncomfortable. Like I didn't ever prey on people like that because it just wasn't in my my personality. But I think I see the connection. That was a lot of my deconversion process from Christianity, was connecting the dots between like cults, political cults, multi-level marketing, how they really all are one and the same. So,
right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and it happens in so many levels, just like you described. There's a woman that a friend of mine asked me to help recently. She was an older woman, like in her 70s, on Twitter, that thought that Keanu Reeves had befriended her. And this is a scam that goes on all over. And this person was charming, and you just seem like such a nice person, and knew all about like where Keanu was all the time, and eventually it was a scam. And she gave this guy so much a lot of money, and was ready to leave her. She has grown kids. She was ready to leave her husband of like many years, thinking that she was going to run off with Keanu Reeves. And it sounds so crazy, but scams like this take advantage of elderly people. They take advantage of people who are desperate. There's always someone, at a disaster ready to take advantage of their pain. It's just, there'll always be predators that will look for people's pain in order to take advantage of.
Absolutely. And religion is no different, because they kind of swoop in and give you the hope of eternal life or seeing your loved ones after you die. And
yes, and it runs throughout society so prevalently. I mean, for me, it was part of my frame of reference to think that there was a second coming of Messiah. That wasn't foreign to me. I grew up just in a Methodist church. It was more of a potluck than a really but still I had a frame of reference for it. And so when they put that message out there, religion is just such a good tool to use to take advantage of people. It has been throughout history. And so
I've even thought about when I was a kid and I was kind of had these questions about religion. And now, neither of my parents are religious. My father's passed, but my parents were not religious for several years now. But when they were, and I would go to them with those questions, like, it wasn't this question, but it's the one that pops into my head right now, is like, there really was a talking snake? And, things like that even as a kid, you're kind of questioning, like, that doesn't really make sense. Is that a fairy tale? And then you would get in trouble. What are you talking about? God's ways are mysterious, and so after a while, your brain starts thinking, well, that kind of opens the door for you to accept things that you shouldn't, because as a child, you would get in trouble if you questioned things logically, and I feel like that's kind of a hidden danger of religion in particular in becoming indoctrinated.
Well, if you want to control people, you've got all these built-in things: guilt, shame, this, an unquestionable being that you can just pull out at your convenience to make whatever view you want the correct one. So it's like buying. You already have all the features built in. Why rebuild the wheel? Just use religion.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you, could you explain how we're kind of on that topic, but of cognitive dissonance. So how does that work in the context of cults?
Well, that cognitive dissonance, you don't feel like you fit in the world somehow, like your belief system is not in sync with the world and so when you're in a cult and you try to leave, you experience cognitive dissonance. It happened for me. I had kind of walked away from the group. I had decided I couldn't take it anymore, and went to live with my brother, and started going back to school. But I hadn't been deprogrammed. I still thought that it was true, but I just couldn't be part of the organization anymore. It was too much for me to fundraise every day. Right. So I thought I could do more for God with an education. But when I started in a school environment, the cognitive dissonance, my ability to fit in the world with my belief system was impossible. And so it's so painful to feel that cognitive dissonance. And so you go running back for the comfort. And I think that that's something that really holds people in, because they don't know how to live in a world where this isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I meant when I talk about that. Yeah.
That is really sad, because especially when, your whole community is sometimes built around religion, the church, and that you're constantly told that you have a church family. And if that is sometimes all you have, I could see how it would be easy to go back to that and just not have support in other areas. And to the comfort of feeling, one of the great things about being in a cult is what you get, one of the benefits, you get to feel exceptional. The exceptionalism is always there in one of any of these. Suddenly you go from being a confused person maybe, or you don't really know what's going on in a lot of areas, or you feel left out, whatever, to feeling like you're part of something truly exceptional, and that your life is exceptional. This belief system is exceptional. You're one of the smart ones. Everyone else just doesn't get it. And that exceptionalism is something, that's why, people of privilege have such a hard time wanting to share, it's that feeling that's a hard thing to give up. People really struggle with that when they leave, of that feeling. So now I'm just a regular person struggling to, like everybody else in the world. And I'm not exceptional like that, Yeah. Or I know in the church that I was a part of, they talk about being one of the elite and one of the elect. Yeah. So even just the language is very much.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. God's chosen. Yeah.
I was going to say that. God's chosen.
Or that too.
Yeah. The chosen few.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and there's a lot of people that's the only way that they feel exceptional.
Yes, exactly.
Way, they don't have anything else. They've been kind of conditioned to be away from the world, and so there's no other, nothing else for them to fall back on when they lose that. That is what I think is so damaging.
It's so compelling too. It's damaging because it's so hard to give up, and you really have to go through that trauma of that loss of feeling exceptional, especially when you felt lost before. And and you can't go back to that really. You've got to have that third identity now that you have to build. And so exceptionalism is such a compelling feature of groups. And that's what so many people, I think, have been so scared lately. And then COVID hit, and then you're isolated, and you're on the internet. You don't know who to trust. You don't feel very good about yourself. And all of a sudden, though, you're in this little group and you feel, now I understand the earth is flat. Only a few people know this, but
yes.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yes.
Yes.
And what I think is so interesting is that people that honestly, before COVID, it's like they had, I hate to say it like this, but they had a brain. And then it seems like after COVID or during COVID, something happened, and I think
like a switch.
Yeah, a switch went off. I think they were probably already primed in a way to be able to accept certain things. But then when they're so just flooded, like what you were saying, and they feel like when they have those Facebook arguments that really don't go anywhere, but it gives them a rush. And then they're their people come in and fight with, they kind of have their back in a sense. That's a heady drug, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And then throw a violent rhetoric in there, then you weaponize,
Mhm.
and then you've got a militia.
Yep. Oh, so how can individuals protect themselves from being manipulated? And what are some strategies for building psychological resilience?
The key is understanding how psychological manipulation works. Some of the key controlling tactics, what people, if somebody wants to control you on a psychological level, how's that going to work? What are they going to try to do? And when you find yourself in an environment that maybe has those things, knowing ahead of time what to watch for that would mean that, okay, this whole environment is a controlling environment, that its aim is to make me their asset. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when I think about how to scale, how to create enough resources for people that are trying to deal with their loved ones and trying to understand how this works and trying to protect themselves, I think we're creating a training course called PM 101, Psychological Manipulation 101. Okay. And it will be available. It'll be free and donation based. And we're using the stories of formers throughout the course to help people understand why it's to tell their story firsthand, whether they're in a hate group or a political group or a religious cult. What was life like before you? Why was this so compelling? And what was it like inside? And how did you get out? But it's a course, so you can actually learn about manipulation and really understand the scientific, knowledge that we have about how people are manipulated. Psychologists and will be giving their explanation. And so I think that's the first thing, is to really educate yourself about psychological manipulation. And then you can protect yourself. And also you'll notice it in your loved ones. You'll see them falling prey. You'll see their psychological pain ahead of time and help them reach for healthy ways to get their needs met, Yeah. Those are the ways to protect, kind of like you have to build herd immunity. You have to get to the point where more people than not understand how to protect themselves and can spot it in others and such.
Yeah. Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about your work that you're doing and just before we wrap up, because we only have a little bit of time left, but I want to hear, or we all want to hear about the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So Antidote is the name of the nonprofit, antidote.ngo, like non-governmental organization. And we are spearheading a public health approach to psychological manipulation. So those 3 pillars that I spoke of are how we envision creating a public health approach. And we're putting most of our resources right now in building services for those directly affected, whether it's people who have, most of the people that come to us, as you can imagine, are loved ones. If you're in a cult, you're not looking for a deprogrammer. You're there because you feel like you found God, whatever. And so it's the loved ones that come to us. So training them, giving them support groups, coaching sessions. We'll have like large coaching sessions where it'll be facilitated by myself or someone. And after people have been through the course and maybe are in a support group, they can come to these. They'll be available every couple of weeks and we'll talk to 2 or 3 people in the group about their situation. Like, I don't know how to talk to this person. I've tried this, and this. What would you recommend? So those kind of coaching, I think people need those 3 things. They need education about what's going on. They need support from other people in similar situations, whether you're trying to heal yourself from coming from one, or you grew up in a cult and now you realize, or your loved one is. You need support. And then also you need some specific help sometimes. Sometimes you need mental health. Oftentimes there's underlying mental health issues. So we're doing a continuing education training for mental health practitioners, or we will be. We're working on building those modules so that we can have as many people as possible that are like, we can recommend, at least we know they've been through our training course, and So that's another aspect. Some people are looking for ways to learn how to be interveners. That's kind of a different than being than mental health practitioners, like an intervention, someone that will help the family talk to their loved one. Communication skills, conflict resolution skills. We'll have workshops on those things. And then in the middle pier, the education, will start using the stories of formers more and more to put information out there to people, and working with influencers to help influencers understand how they can help their communities protect themselves and such. And then creating policy, like we're working on a white paper right now to make the case of a public health approach. So that's the organization.
Awesome. Wow. That's amazing.
It's actually it's exciting to me because I work with kids who've been abused, either physically or sexually, and I have some trauma focused therapists on staff. And I'm thinking, so I live and work in a very uber religious, ultra conservative, fundamentalist place. And so it's very difficult to try to get some things like this for our kids, but a lot of them have experienced their abuse through their church, or at least have the abuser has been held up by the church. And so having that, I think, can be very helpful. So I'm going to keep an eye on your website, because I would love to be able to get that for the therapists on staff and get them trained.
Yeah. Now we're building as fast as we can, and, you have to get to the point where your fundraising efforts are big enough to get the bigger donors to hire staff to build the machine, sort of. But we're working as fast as we can. Most therapists, especially if they're trauma informed, have most of what they need. They just need kind of an overlay of some information specifically about the tactics of psychological manipulation and what helps people the most that have been traumatized in that way. So it's not like starting from scratch at all. It's just an overlay.
Right. And what are some ways that people could help if they wanted to help fundraise? Do you take donations or?
Oh, yeah, we're a non-for-profit organization. Okay. And so, we're 501c3. And so there's a donate button and we're always fundraising. We get a lot of help just from people that make small donations, and that keeps our lights on while we're growing enough to be able to reach out to bigger donors. If you know people, the family foundations, anything like that I could, talk to, that would be super helpful.
Awesome. Well, I make sure I show this website one more time. So if we want to stay in touch with what you're doing and see how this plays out, because I think it's super important for people to be aware of just recovering and getting help after, high control cults and religions. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, thank you for what you do.
Thank you for coming on as well. It was really wonderful to get to know a little bit more about you and to hear you talk, other than on a TED Talk. You're just a very compelling person. I think it's very important work. Very
much. So I have just one more final question before we begin to wrap up, because we just have a couple more minutes. But what advice would you give to someone who suspects that they may be a victim of psychological manipulation, or who wants to better understand the dynamics of manipulation in their own life?
I think it's the same understand what psychological manipulation is. Start looking in and researching about. Just like if you suspected that you were overusing alcohol, start looking and informing yourself about, if I was in a cult, what would the key components be? There's a lot out there, especially in the cult arena. There's some more academic stuff about like terrorist type of, countering violent extremism. There's a whole bunch of a canon of study and research around extremism. That's something. But if you think that maybe you're being manipulated, even in a relationship, start thinking in terms of getting a counselor, finding someone who's trauma informed, finding someone, maybe look at the anti-cult there's a lot of anti-cult people, like you mentioned, Steve Hassan, and there's many people who consider themselves cult experts and cult counselors.
Awesome. Thank you, Dorothy, for that nice comment. Yeah, well, we just want to thank you so much for your time today and for for everything and for being here, answering all of our questions. And if can people find you on social media if they want to connect with you? Are you on any platforms?
I personally, we're trying to build that up. And then I just don't have time right now to answer. There's so many people, and I'm so torn with people want one-on-one, and some of the emails that come in through our contact us page are people that are desperate for help. And we are working as fast as we can to be able to create like AA, Al-Anon model support groups, peer-led, so that we can scale really quickly to help so many people. So if you come there, you can hit the contact us page and put it in there, and we will be reaching out to you and doing everything we can to help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sunny, did you want to wrap up anything?
Yes, I wanted to thank our patrons, first of all. We have Eric Azoles, Tara, we have Ryan. We see her, she's part of our group. Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, myself, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. I want to thank everyone. That makes a big difference, and it's how we're able to keep our lights on, so to speak, able to do what we do. So we want to thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you. And we also just wanted to make mention that Skeptic Haven is looking for anyone who would like to volunteer behind the scenes. So if you are interested, please send us a message. You can do so on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. We are on all the socials. So yeah, send us a message. And also don't forget to subscribe, because we have shows throughout the week. Sunny has a show, and it's on Thursdays, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, Thursdays. And then we have the women's show like this every Saturday. We also have the Global Atheists earlier in the day on Saturdays. And then every Wednesday I host Secular Soapbox with Baphometal. And this week we are doing an episode with Derek from Myth Vision, Dr. Joshua Bowen, and Dr. Kip Davis on Was Moses a Myth? So you'll want to come back for that. It'll be a really great discussion.
What a great panel. That's fantastic.
I know. I'm excited for that. Just for the topic too. So yeah.
And then of course we can't forget about our newest show, our call-in show that we're having on Sundays.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That one's so new.
I know it's very new. We've only had a couple of them, but that's really fun. I had the first night, and it was so much fun. I was on a high for hours afterwards. So please be sure to check that out as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Diane, and thank you, Sunny, for hosting.
Co-hosting. You were the host.
Oh, right. Right. It's a shared thing. Yeah. So anyways, thank you to everyone in the chat. We love when you're commenting and interacting. So we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past and the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness.